The third watch of the night had begun, and I was running. I was running on a deserted road in the dark night, covered in a black sheet. My tears were flowing continuously. I did not know where I was going. I had no idea of my destination. I did not have a destination. I did not know the path where I was running to. But at that time I had no other option but to run away. Perhaps this was the last way to save my honor. What my father had done to me, if I had not run away, what else would I have done? I was running on the side of the road hoping that someone might help me, that I might find an angel, and at that moment a car passed by me, playing loud music. Hearing the sound of the car, hope had risen in my heart, but the car was moving forward quickly. Suddenly the car had applied the brakes, and seeing it stop like that, my heart stopped in my chest. Why had those people stopped? I was just thinking that when the car, as fast as it had moved forward, reversed back and came to a stop near me, I also stopped in a happy mood and started looking because I no longer had the courage to run away. But seeing this, my senses had gone. When the windows of the car rolled down at the same time, 4 ugly men were sitting in the car, holding cans of beer in their hands. Seeing this, someone took my heart in their fists and crushed it. I had once again fallen into the clutches of the beasts. I gathered all my courage and started running quickly and ran away. I started making noises when the car came to a stop while driving fast. The back door of the car opened and my arm was in someone's strong grip. I couldn't free myself even if I wanted to. Someone pulled me inside the car and the car door closed, and then with me. I didn't like my father at all. I was afraid of him because he kept staring at me all the time. It felt like his eyes were tearing my existence apart. I felt disgusted by his eyes. I wasn't such a child that I couldn't recognize my father's eyes. Whenever my mother was out of the house, my father would come home. I was very angry with this. I had only one solution to escape from it. I would lock myself in my room, and that room was my only refuge. I was a Pathan girl, and I belonged to Peshawar. My parents loved each other very much, and I only came to know that they had married by choice. But when my mother became pregnant, my grandmother started saying that she wanted a grandson, so why not a daughter? Hearing this, my mother became very worried. What if she had a daughter? My grandmother was not happy even before this marriage. That's why she started this son-in-law song, and by saying this all the time, she also instilled the same thing in my father's heart because my father was the only brother. So my grandmother said that only if he had a son, he would be the heir to this family. And I don't know what happened. My grandmother had told my mother in clear words that if she gave birth to a daughter, these people would divorce my mother. My mother explained to my father a lot that she had no choice in this matter. Whether it was a son or a daughter was in the hands of Allah, but no one listened to her. My mother tried her best to explain to him and prayed in every way to not have a daughter and accepted every wish. But my mother was unlucky that she gave birth to me. My father did not even see my appearance and divorced my mother in the hospital. My mother took me and reached the doorstep of Mecca crying. My maternal grandparents had already passed away. There was an uncle, but they could not bear the thought of my mother was wasting her youth just for me. They also hated me because my mother's house was ruined because of me. I came to know this much later. They wanted my mother to quickly build her second home and hand over this girl, that is, me, to her father. But the father, who had not even seen my appearance and only I had divorced my love for the crime of having a daughter. Why would she keep me with her? That's why my mother didn't want to leave me, because I was not guilty of any of this. When my uncles increased their pressure on me to get married, my mother agreed to the marriage, but my mother had only one condition for her marriage: that she would marry a man who would accept me as her daughter. When this condition was put before the relative, she clearly said that someone would accept your divorced sister by mistake, but who would accept someone else's daughter? And he was right in saying that no matter what relationship he entered, he would not return after hearing his mother's condition. Finally, a relationship came up in which the man's first wife had died and he had no children. When my mother's condition was put in front of him, he immediately accepted. Perhaps he too was afraid of children. At least that's what everyone thought at that time. I was 10 years old when my mother got married to my stepfather. He loved me very much from the beginning. He would take care of me along with my mother. Whenever he came from outside, he would definitely buy me something. My mother was also happy that her daughter was getting her father's love, and everyone else also felt the same way. Since he had no children of his own, he loved this girl as if she were his own. Everyone was jealous of my luck, but as soon as I regained consciousness and became able to understand, I began to feel that my father kept staring at me with strangely piercing eyes. These eyes could never be those of a father who penetrated deep inside. Whenever he got a chance, he would look at me carefully and smile. My heart would tremble with fear. I felt his eyes digging into my being. Now I was starting to shy away from him. My heart wanted to tell my mother, but perhaps this was my illusion, and I was also afraid that after my revelation, she might leave my mother, or that my mother might misunderstand me because she had given me the same place as her daughter in front of my mother. I just had the thought that I was starting to keep myself within my limits, and perhaps this was my mistake. I should have told my mother. Whenever my father came home, I rarely went in front of him, and if I did, it was only when my mother was around. Otherwise, I would mostly stay locked in my room. Time passed like this. My mother's health started to deteriorate. She was always holding her stomach and suffering. Seeing her like this, I used to get very worried. I would tell my father to show her to the doctor. The only answer he would get was that I don't have enough money to spend. I was already losing money. Finally, one day, he felt sorry for his mother and took her to the doctor. But by then, it was too late. The doctor told me that both of my mother's kidneys had failed. She wouldn't be able to live much longer. It was a long process to get a new kidney, and it would cost a lot of money. He had very little time. The doctor's words hit me like lightning. I started crying. I had no support in this world except my mother. I couldn't trust my stepfather at all. I didn't even know who my own father was. But maybe it was my destiny to endure this ordeal. A week later, my mother passed away, and I just cried helplessly. Everyone came to the funeral, but no one was ready to take me with me. I was starting to feel scared now because everyone had gone back after the funeral in the evening. That night was the first night without my mother when my father called me and said, "Make some tea for me. Now your mother is not here, so you will have to take responsibility for my work." Hearing his words, I got up quietly and made some tea and went to his room to give it to him, because he was right. Now, I had to do all the work. How long could I hide from him? But seeing the scene in front of me, my heart was broken. My father was sitting half reclined on the bed, smoking a cigarette. On the table next to him, there were several black glass bottles. I knew very well what was in them because I had seen these bottles before in the house. Seeing me, my father smiled meaningfully. I immediately put the tea in my trembling hands and came out of the room. There were tears in my eyes that were flowing continuously. I came into the room, locked the door, and sat on the floor and started crying silently because apart from that, I had nothing in my hands. I couldn't sleep because I was afraid that my father might do something to me while I was sleeping. I had decided that I would go to my uncle's house as soon as morning came, and I would become a maid in his house, but I wouldn't stay here. In that case, at least my honor would be safe. So, as soon as morning came and my father left the house for work, I also picked up all my belongings, which I had packed the night before, and went to my uncle's house. Seeing me with all my belongings, my uncle was furious. He also had bruises on his forehead. When he saw me, he said, "Your relationship with us was as long as your mother was alive. Now that she has passed away, all our relationships with you have ended. Your uncle was my last refuge." Hearing these words from his mouth, I started crying and even begged him to keep me here. I would lie in a corner. I would not ask for anything from you. I would do all your work, but there, everyone's blood would be shed. He had turned white. He was not ready to keep me for a minute. I had returned home with the same steps. It seemed less like a home and more like a prison to me. My mother had passed away. Now only me and my stepfather were left in the house. Earlier, He used to live in a state of anxiety because of my mother. Now, he would openly stare at me with lustful eyes and make meaningful gestures. Now, I had completely locked myself in my room. Whenever I came home, he would not go in front of me at all. He would call me many times and ask me to do various things, but I would not come out at all. He would cook the food and put it in the kitchen. He would eat it himself and do all the other things like that. But I would spend the whole night awake without coming out. I couldn't sleep because of fear. One day, due to a high fever, I woke up at sunset. I was sleeping when I heard some heavy footsteps outside my room. I was sleeping, but I was startled by this noise. I sat up. The door to the room was closed, and she always kept it locked, but I could hear the whispers of some people from outside. I went near the door in fear and leaned over the keyhole to look. Seeing the scene in front of me, my complexion turned pale. What new trouble was about to arise now? 3 or 4 men were standing in front of Abu, who were staggering and falling into his room. They had been drinking. This was indicated by their tone and staggering steps. They were drunk men, and I was alone among them all. Just thinking about it made my hair stand on end. I hid in my room and started crying and seeking refuge in God. The whole night till morning, the sound of loud laughter kept hitting my ears. They had all left the house by morning. It was the night of doomsday for me. But now it had become a daily routine. Every day, those bad friends of my father used to come home and I would spend the whole night crying and afraid. One day, I heard something that made me lose my senses. Those people were sitting in my father's room, and I knew that they did not leave the room at night. My father was home all day that day, so I had been in the room since morning and had not eaten anything. So I sneaked out of the room with the intention of eating something. When I started passing by this room, I came to know that these people wanted to buy me by paying my father a certain price. My whole being was shaken, and on the other hand, my father had happily sold me by telling me his price. I started thinking in a daze, what should I do now? Who should I ask for help? Then I tripped, and the vase on the table fell to the ground and broke. The people sitting inside were startled by the noise, and before anyone could get up and come out, it was not safe for me to stay there any longer. I ran out of the house because there was no point in even going to my room. I didn't know where I had to go. What was my destination? And would I be able to escape from the clutches of these people or not? I was just running away. I kept thinking about my mother. I wish she were alive today. All this would not have happened. Maybe then a car passed by me. I thought maybe there was a Messiah. But my hair stood up when I saw the same 4 bad men sitting inside, drunk. My breathing had started to stop. Before I could run any further, they had grabbed me and made me sit inside the car. One of them was abusing me and slapping me several times at once. Maybe this was the one who had paid the price for me. My lips were split and my nose was bleeding. I don't know what they were going to do to me now. I wish someone would come to my aid. I was praying to God in my heart because only He could help me at that time. These people were holding me tightly and making me sit. The car had only gone a short distance when it seemed that there was a roadblock on the road. I saw a ray of hope. There were several police officers standing there checking the vehicles. Maybe someone had informed them or it was their routine. These men wanted to turn the car back, but there was a long line of cars behind them, and they were stuck. Then some officers came near the car. I used all my strength to remove the man's hand that was on my mouth and shouted and drew him towards me. It took only 2 minutes for me to get free and for him to be handcuffed. And here I was losing my courage. I was in tears. A police officer named Javed came to me and started reassuring me, saying that you are a very brave girl. Nothing will happen to you. You are safe now. When he asked me about my home, I told him the whole truth. He first took me to the hospital and then brought me to his home. He was a man of good morals and was the only son of his parents. A few days later, Javed's mother offered me to be his daughter-in-law, which I immediately accepted because I had no support other than Javed and no place to go after leaving here. My stepfather was also a jailer. I was living, and Javed had arranged all this. Now, a long time has passed since my marriage. Everyone takes great care of me. But even today, when I remember that past like a horrible dream, my hair stands on end. If Javed had not been there that night and the search had not been carried out on the road, I don't know where I would be today. I would have been alive or dead. But God does not do injustice to anyone.